How to be an assertive woman. Does the idea of being an assertive woman scare you a bit? After today's video, I don't think it will anymore. Welcome, I'm Kim Marie, and this channel is all about supporting women to step into their most empowered self so they can live their most fulfilling life. Now, being an assertive woman has historically been pretty scary for most women. After all, we have a history of being burned at the stake and having all kinds of oppression happen over the course of centuries. So it's quite understandable why that fear might exist within you. So today we're going to explore what exactly assertiveness is, how we can step into it more effectively, and also explore some of the common struggles to step into it more effectively. So first we want to understand assertiveness. Now, assertiveness by definition is declaratory. Now, in my Solace program for women, I teach about the art of communication, and declarations are one of the big tools in communication. We have to declare what it is we want or we're doing if we're going to move forward in our life and we're going to step into a sense of empowerment or fulfillment. And in order to be declaratory, we have to be assertive. And so that's really what it means, is to be able to declare, I am this, I'm doing this, I'm choosing that, I'm deciding this, however that is, in terms of making a declaration around what you want and who you are. It also has a lot to do with putting yourself forward, standing up for yourself. That's also aspects of the definition of what it means to be assertive. Now, why is this so important for women? Well, for one, we've often held back, and I know so many women who end up growing in tremendous resentment or anger or frustration, or even a sense of victimhood that keeps us from standing in our own full truth, in the full expression of who we are. And that's what we want to do in terms of becoming more assertive. I want to be clear also that to be assertive is not about being mean, okay? It's not about being pushy or aggressive. And this is one of the common struggles women face when it comes to being assertive. They're afraid they're going to be perceived as pushy or bitchy or negative or demanding or even arrogant, okay? The same level of assertion coming from a woman side by side with a similar level of assertion coming from a man in a corporate setting often is received very differently, not in all places. And so I don't want to express that this is going on everywhere, but there is a lot of truth to it. There was a story I remember hearing of a situation in flight when a person needed a doctor, and the flight attendant called out, "Is there a doctor on board?" And a woman stood up in her seat, raised her hand and said, "I am a doctor, I can help, what's going on?" And right as she was finishing saying that, a man stood up and said, "I'm a nurse, I can help, what's happening?" And the flight attendant chose the man, and yet the doctor was right there and willing. And apparently her husband said, you know, she's a doctor, she can help. And the flight attendant said, "Sir, we have it under control. We're all set." And there's not, it's almost like our culture, the patriarchal dominance culture, automatically assumes that when a man asserts himself versus when a woman asserts herself, like they both made a declaration. They both said, "I'm a nurse, I'm a doctor," right? And yet there's a certain level of belief in the assertion or trust in the assertion that our culture has created. So the more women learn to assert themselves and trust that they can, the more we will start to see a greater sense of balance and harmony between the masculine and feminine in our culture. This is one of the big reasons we struggle with it, but also a big reason it's so important to make sure we start practicing how to be more assertive. We also, because of our culture, tend to have inner barriers toward being assertive. We get filled with self-doubt. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I'm not really as good as I think. Maybe I can't say that I accomplished this or did this. Maybe it would be perceived wrong or whatever, right? We get into this incredible story around all of the what ifs, all of the maybes, all of the shoulds, whatever it is, instead of being able to declare, yes, this is true. I am this. I choose that. I decide that, however it is, right? So these are the struggles. We have a cultural struggle. We have our personal inner doubt struggle and self-worth struggle. These are the kinds of things that get in our way of being more assertive. So how do we overcome those obstacles to assertiveness? Well, one of the big things we have to do is to start challenging societal norms. We have to step into doing the things that feel a little uncomfortable. We have to resist what's normal and allow ourselves to maybe upset the apple cart a bit and challenge the status quo. I'm not talking about doing this in some kind of big, intense, aggressive way, but why not question authority? Why not speak up for yourself and stand in your truth? Why not say, no, that doesn't work for me? Why not set boundaries around ourselves? Why? Because we often struggle with those barriers, but we have to be willing to challenge the status quo if we're going to learn to move beyond those barriers. So another way that we can overcome the obstacles is to build more self-confidence and self-respect. We need to be respecting ourselves and knowing that we are valuable. Our thoughts, our boundaries, our assertions matter. Okay? And another piece here to understand is that to assert oneself is not the same as to be aggressive or to dominate oneself or to try to be overbearing or controlling. It just means to declare, to stand in your truth, to be comfortable and confident in who you are and self-respecting of what matters to you. So again, the more we practice and use things like coaching and mentoring to build our self-confidence and build our self-respect, the more that we can find our capacity to have more assertiveness in our lives. We also need to deal with our fear of conflict or disapproval. One of the biggest things I see in my coaching clients where women are afraid to be more assertive is they're afraid of being judged. They're afraid of the disapproval. They're afraid of that judgment and criticism that's going to come if they assert themselves, and they don't want the conflict. They don't want other people to be upset with them. They don't want to deal with trying to explain themselves. Well, part of asserting yourself is really about just standing in your truth. And I've always loved the concept that the truth needs no defense. We don't need to defend ourselves. We need to just continue stating what is. And so there's this practice around, if we're confronting someone because they don't like that we're asserting ourselves and we're saying, no, this is my boundary and I'm sticking to it, they can try to judge, they can try to criticize, they can try to change your mind. And rather than defending yourself in that space, you can simply practice saying, nope, this is my boundary, this is what I choose. It's simply a matter of standing in it without even having to defend it. Because when you stand in it, it's largely immobile, right? It's that we don't know how to stand in it, or we haven't practiced standing in it, that we struggle to move forward through the conflict and through the criticism. So what are some techniques to develop assertiveness? Well, one of the biggest, as I've mentioned and touched on briefly, is communication. Knowing how to communicate, understanding how to communicate. I have an entire communication playlist, so be sure to check that out, because I'm always putting videos out on more communication and more tools along those lines. And of course, my programs and my coaching can help tremendously in teaching you guidelines around communication. Another that we've also touched on is the concept of setting boundaries and saying no effectively. And then, similar to that, is the concept of our body language and our voice tone. We don't have to speak it in a mean way. We can simply speak it as if we're asking someone to pass the salt at the dinner table, right? Nope, thank you, this is what I'm doing. I'm good with this. Oh, thank you. I'm good with this. We just speak it in this tone and in this body language that is so clear. We're good. We're stable. We're strong. We're sovereign. We're going to stand in that queenly archetype that allows us to assert ourselves, to be who we are here to be. So I want to share some healthy practices for assertiveness so that we keep it healthy. And one of them is the idea of balancing assertiveness with empathy. We can assert our boundaries, our truth, our sense of self, but we also want to have empathy for where other people are at, right? And having empathy doesn't mean you have to to change your boundaries, but we can just feel for the other person, maybe have understanding and compassion that they may be disappointed in our asserting ourselves, and that's okay. Disappointment is an acceptable situation. We also want to practice regular self-reflection and self-awareness, constantly noticing, what is me? What am I asserting? What do I want to assert? What do I need to assert? What do I maybe need to back off on that I'm asserting too heavily because I'm being defensive and I just want to stand in my truth and trust that more. So we want to be constantly self-reflecting and noticing these things as we practice being more assertive in a healthy way. Now, also, it can be really helpful to practice or to maintain a certain healthy assertiveness practice when we have support of coaching and mentors. And I invite you, I'm going to put a link in the description to my free Inner Wisdom Circle community. It's completely free. It's filled with women on the path to their most empowered self, seeking to find greater support and encouragement. It's a beautiful place to share what's going on for you. It's private, it's off of social media, which I love. So be sure to click the link below, because the more we can surround ourselves in spaces where it's okay to practice assertiveness, to set our boundaries, to learn more about ourselves, to self-reflect, that's going to help us find a healthy balance in being more assertive. So, of course, there are plenty of benefits to being assertive as a woman. And one of those is that we end up with a tremendous amount of self-confidence and even self-esteem. We start to notice that we can stand in our truth. We can be ourselves. We are allowed to do that. And it's acceptable, even if uncomfortable or disappointing to some. In general, the more that we stand true and live in alignment with our truth, the more everything around us starts to feel the same, and that confidence continues to build, that self-esteem continues to build, and we can live an entirely different life from that place of feeling able to be assertive. Our ability to be assertive also greatly improves our relationships and our capacity to communicate. When we know how to state our truth and say what we need, our partner isn't left guessing, right? We aren't leaving people to wonder what we would really appreciate or like in our life and what we really need. And that's a whole other video, the idea of, well, but my close people to me should know what I need. No, I'll just say no. I will assert no on that one, because we cannot expect other people to read our minds. And so when we are assertive in being able to say what we need, all the relationships around us actually feel more secure and more safe, because they know where we stand. They know who we are. Think about it from your perspective on anybody that you've tried to read their minds. If they just told you what they needed and set their boundary around it, you would feel so much clearer. You might not always like it, but you would know where you stand with them in relation to them. So this improves relationships so very much. And you also end up with a lot more success in both your personal and your professional life. If you are learning to be more assertive as a woman, you're going to impact your colleagues and coworkers, or maybe if you're a leader and manager, you're going to be able to impact those around you, and you can encourage the same assertiveness from those around you. By having a clear sense of who you are and where you stand, you're going to be so much better able to set clear boundaries around your work, around your family, around your personal self-care, anything that you need. It's going to drastically improve your personal and professional life. All right, so I hope you've gotten lots of tips on what's needed to be more assertive, how to define assertiveness and see maybe where you are or are not struggling to be assertive. And I hope that you'll continue to find ways of growing in your assertiveness. I encourage you to check out my Solace program. The link is in the description. This is an ongoing program for women, and I share so many tools, such as the art of communication tools that I mentioned, that teach you how to stand in your truth, how to be more empowered on your path. So check that out. And until then, I hope you can find healthy levels of assertiveness to step into your truth, into your most empowered self. I'll see you in the next video.